The ceasefire is holding, but just barely. As of May 2nd, 2026, the U.S. Navy has turned away 45 vessels attempting to breach the Hormuz blockade. Iran's latest 14-point peace proposal was rejected by the White House. And now, a senior Iranian military commander has publicly stated that renewed war with the United States is not just possible, it is likely. While diplomats talk, Iran's military is quietly doing something else entirely. The question is, what exactly are they building? Welcome back to CN Alert, the channel that tracks what the world's militaries are actually doing, not just what they're saying. If this is the first time here, consider subscribing. New developments in this conflict are moving fast, and this channel covers every critical shift. Here is what will be covered today. The date is May 2nd, 2026. The United States Navy is sitting at the entrance of the Strait of Hormuz, and it is not moving. Ship after ship has approached the blockade line. Ship after ship has been turned away. 45 vessels in total, no exceptions, no negotiations at the waterline. Just a steady professional enforcement of American military will, day after day, without interruption. Inside Iran, the pressure is beginning to show. Iran had spent days putting together a peace proposal, 14 points, submitted through Pakistan as a back channel. Iranian diplomats believed it was enough to bring the Americans to the table. It was not. The White House reviewed this proposal and rejected it without hesitation. The response from the U.S. side was blunt. The proposal was unacceptable, and further military action was being considered if no real agreement was reached soon. That rejection sent a shockwave through Tehran. But here's what makes this moment so difficult for Iran. The country does not have one leader making decisions right now. It has three competing power centers, all pulling in different directions, all trying to survive what is happening. The first group is the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the IRGC. These are Iran's hardliners. They control the missiles, the military, and the proxy forces spread across the region. They are the loudest voices inside Iran right now, and they are pushing the most aggressive line. The second group is the clerical establishment. The man expected to become Iran's next supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, is reportedly injured and cannot appear in public. That leaves a dangerous gap at the top of the religious chain of command, at exactly the moment when strong, unified leadership is needed most. The third group is the political class. The foreign minister, the president, and various civilian officials who are trying to find a negotiated exit from this crisis. They want a deal. They know what continued conflict could cost Iran. But they are being squeezed from two sides. The IRGC pushing them toward confrontation, and the U.S. blockade strangling the economy from the outside. These three groups are not working together. They are competing. And that competition is creating the confusion that the White House was referring to when it said it did not know who Iran's real leaders were. Into that chaos stepped Mohammad Jafar Asadi, a senior figure in Iran's military central command. He did not speak like a diplomat. He spoke like a commander preparing for battle. He stated publicly that Iran's military believes a renewed conflict with the United States is likely. He said that U.S. actions were aimed at escaping a situation of America's own making. That statement raised eyebrows internationally because it does not match the reality on the ground. The U.S. blockade is not retreating. American forces in the region number more than 50,000. Carrier strike groups remain positioned and ready. If the United States was trying to exit this situation, it chose a very unusual way to do it. What Assadi's words actually reveal is something more important. The IRGC's most powerful commanders are not afraid of another round of fighting. For them, conflict is familiar territory. And in a moment where Iran's political structure is fracturing internally, some within that military leadership may see renewed war not as a disaster to avoid, but as an opportunity to seize control. Iran's state media, particularly the IRGC-aligned Fars news agency, has been publishing and amplifying these statements continuously. That is not random. It is a coordinated effort by the military faction to dominate the narrative, inside Iran and beyond its borders. The ceasefire, from where Iran's military stands, is not a road toward peace. It is a window, a period of time to be used wisely before the next move arrives. And the next move, whatever it turns out to be, is not being decided by diplomats. It is being decided by the men with the missiles. While diplomats argue over proposals and commanders make threats in front of cameras, something else is happening in the shadows. Something quieter, something more dangerous. Iran is using this ceasefire to rebuild. Not at the negotiating table, not through back channels in Islamabad, but deep inside mountain bunkers, converted factories, and hidden storage sites scattered across Iranian territory, places that satellites struggle to see and bombs have not yet reached. The blockade has cut off Iran's oil revenue. The strikes have destroyed a significant portion of its production facilities. On the surface, it looks like a regime running out of options. But the IRGC does not think like a government. It thinks like an organization that has survived decades of sanctions, isolation, and pressure. And organizations like that do not sit still during a pause in fighting. They adapt. The first priority for Iran's military right now is not building new weapons. It cannot. The industrial base that once produced Shahed drones and ballistic missiles at scale has been severely damaged. Factories have been hit. Supply chains have been disrupted. Raw materials are harder to obtain under blockade conditions. So instead of manufacturing, the IRGC has shifted its focus to something smarter: salvage, concealment, and repositioning. Deep inside Iran's underground missile cities, facilities carved into mountains over decades specifically to survive exactly this kind of conflict, military teams are working around the clock. They are digging out missiles, munitions, and launchers that were pre-positioned before the strikes began. They are assessing what survived. They are moving what can be moved. And they are hiding what cannot be moved yet in locations that make targeting them from the air as difficult as possible. The locations they are choosing are deliberate and calculated. Mountains provide natural protection. But the IRGC is also reportedly moving weapons into areas where striking them carries a heavy cost, near civilian infrastructure, near populated zones, in places where a precision strike becomes a far more complicated decision. This is not accidental. This is doctrine. It is how the IRGC has operated for years, and it is how it intends to fight if the conflict resumes. The second priority is intelligence, specifically targeting intelligence. Iran lost a significant portion of its ability to strike U.S. assets with precision when the initial strikes degraded its radar networks and command structures. What it needs now is updated data, precise coordinates, movement patterns, and real-time tracking of U.S. naval and air assets in the region. Reports indicate that China remains a key partner in filling that gap, providing satellite imagery and electronic intelligence through back channels that the blockade cannot physically intercept. The T-01B satellite, operated through Beijing with IRGC access, has previously been identified as a source of high-resolution targeting data. That relationship has not ended. It has simply become more important. The third priority is adaptation. The IRGC's commanders watched the first round of this conflict carefully. They saw which systems worked, which failed, and where U.S. defenses showed strain. Swarm tactics using fast attack boats nearly overwhelmed Aegis defenses during the USS Reagan engagement. Large salvos of anti-ship missiles forced American destroyers to burn through interceptor stockpiles at a rate that cannot be sustained indefinitely. Those lessons are being studied, refined, and built into whatever the next playbook looks like. What Iran is assembling behind the scenes is not a rebuilt military. Not yet. What it is assembling is a survival strategy, enough capability to make a second round of conflict costly enough that the United States would prefer a deal over another war. That calculation may be wrong. American forces in the region are larger, better supplied, and more capable than Iran's degraded military can currently match. But the IRGC does not need to win. It never has. It only needs to make winning expensive enough that the other side reconsiders. And right now, quietly, methodically, and out of sight, that is exactly what it is doing. Every military in the world has a wish list. Iran's wish list right now is not long. It is not ambitious. It is brutally practical, built around one single question. If the ceasefire breaks tomorrow morning, what can actually be fired, launched, and used within the first 60 minutes? That question is driving every decision the IRGC is making right now. The strikes that hit Iran during the initial phase of this conflict were devastating in scope. Assessments suggest that approximately 80% of Iran's active missile capability was degraded. Production facilities were hit. Launch infrastructure was destroyed. Radar networks were taken offline. On paper, Iran's offensive punch looks severely weakened, but paper does not tell the whole story. Because buried under hundreds of feet of solid rock, inside hardened underground complexes that engineers spent decades constructing specifically to survive this kind of assault, a meaningful portion of Iran's arsenal is still intact. Some assessments place surviving stocks closer to half of pre-conflict levels, not because the strikes failed, but because Iran had pre-positioned so much inside these mountain facilities before the fighting began. The IRGC planned for exactly this scenario, and that planning is now paying off. The weapons Iran is pulling out of those bunkers right now fall into three clear categories. The first category is ballistic missiles, and these are the ones that concern U.S. military planners the most. Iran is prioritizing its solid fuel systems above everything else. Solid fuel missiles do not require long preparation times. They do not need fueling teams standing in the open for extended periods before launch. They can be moved on mobile launchers, hidden, repositioned, and fired quickly, making them significantly harder to detect and destroy before they leave the ground. The Sajal, the Khaibar Shakan, and the Ahmad series fall into this category. These are not short-range weapons. They carry range and payload combinations that make them a credible threat to U.S. bases and naval assets across the region. The second category is shorter-range precision rockets, specifically the Fatah family of missiles. These are designed for area saturation rather than single high-value strikes. The logic is straightforward. If Iran cannot guarantee that one missile hits its target precisely, it can launch enough of them across a wide area to overwhelm the defensive systems trying to intercept them. Quantity becomes the strategy when quality has been degraded. American destroyers carry a finite number of interceptors. Flooding the zone is how the IRGC intends to exhaust them. The third category is anti-ship weapons, and this is where Iran's geographic position gives it a natural advantage it has not lost. The Strait of Hormuz is narrow. Ships moving through it are predictable in their paths. Anti-ship ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, including systems like the College Fars and the Noor, are being repositioned along the coastline, on islands, and in coastal launch sites as quickly as the IRGC can move them. These weapons were heavily targeted during the initial strikes, but enough survived, and enough are being moved into new positions, that the threat to commercial and military shipping has not disappeared. Alongside all of this sits the Shahed 136, the one-way attack drone that has become one of the IRGC's most reliable tools. They are cheap, they are slow, they are not sophisticated, but they are produced in enormous numbers, they are difficult to track on radar at low altitude, and when launched in large swarms they force defensive systems to engage target after target in rapid succession. Iran is working to replenish its Shahed stockpiles as fast as its damaged production lines allow. The picture that emerges from all of this is not a broken military desperate for mercy. It is something more uncomfortable, a damaged but functional force making intelligent choices about what to save, what to hide, and what to load first, waiting for the moment someone gives the order. There's a particular kind of silence that exists just before a military operation begins. Not the silence of peace, the silence of preparation, of systems being checked, of pilots reviewing their routes one final time, of commanders sitting with their hands folded, waiting for a decision that has not yet been made, but could be made at any moment. That silence is what currently hangs over the Strait of Hormuz. And if it breaks, the United States military is not starting from zero. It is starting from a position it has been building and reinforcing every single day since the ceasefire began. More than 50,000 American personnel are currently in the region. 3 carrier strike groups remain positioned and ready. The 82nd Airborne is deployed within range. The blockade fleet has not shrunk. It has grown more practiced, more coordinated, and more capable of transitioning from enforcement to combat operations within hours. The infrastructure for a second round of strikes is not being assembled. It is already assembled. It is already running. It is simply waiting. The approach this time, military analysts believe, would look different from the first round. The initial phase of this conflict involved a large number of targets, struck across a wide area in a short period of time. A second phase would likely be narrower, more surgical, and built around one primary objective above all others: finding and destroying Iran's surviving ballistic missile capability before those missiles leave the ground. That is where the F-22 Raptor enters the picture. The F-22 carries one of the most powerful airborne radar systems currently in operational service. It can detect and track ballistic missiles during their boost phase, the critical window immediately after launch when a missile is climbing and most vulnerable to interception. In a conflict where Iran's primary remaining threat is ballistic missiles fired from mobile launchers hidden across difficult terrain, that detection capability becomes one of the most valuable assets in the entire American order of battle. The F-22 does not just fight. It sees earlier, further, and more precisely than almost anything else in the sky. Working alongside it would be the F-16CJ, the Wild Weasel variant specifically designed for one mission: suppression of enemy air defenses. Its job is to find Iranian radar systems and surface-to-air missile sites that have been repaired or repositioned during the ceasefire, and eliminate them using high-speed anti-radiation missiles that home in on the radar emissions themselves. Every Iranian radar that goes offline creates safer airspace for the aircraft that follow. Those aircraft include the F-35 Lightning II, hunting mobile missile launchers across contested territory, identifying hardened underground sites, and passing precise targeting data to other platforms in real time. And then, the F-15E Strike Eagle, the two-seat workhorse of precision strike operations, receiving that data and delivering the weapons on target with the kind of accuracy that leaves little margin for survival. Behind all of it, the EA-18G Growler would be blanketing Iranian communications and radar networks with electronic interference, making it harder for the IRGC to coordinate its response, harder for its air defense systems to lock onto American aircraft, and harder for its command structure to function under pressure. Against Iran's Shahed, drone swarms, high-powered microwave weapons, and layered close-in defense systems would be the primary tools, designed to neutralize large numbers of low-cost threats without exhausting the interceptor stockpiles that need to be preserved for ballistic missile defense. The picture that emerges is not one of chaos. It is one of overwhelming, layered, coordinated precision. Every platform feeding information to every other platform, every gap in Iran's defenses identified and exploited in sequence. Iran will fight back. It will launch everything it has saved. It will swarm, saturate, and push every defensive system to its limit. But the United States military has spent this ceasefire preparing too. The silence over Hormuz is not empty, it is loaded.